once we have, we are in the process of getting things put on YouTube and Vimeo. So once we have everything set up, we will go ahead and put these webinars, the recording of these webinars on those sites as well, so you'll have access to those. Today we're going to have another wonderful session on assessment. I know everybody loves assessment and numbers. We've got two great folks from Alabama who have been doing assessment for a few years who are going to share their experience with us. We've got Kevin Walker, who's head of assessment and government information, and Sara Maurice Whitver, who is the coordinator for library instruction and area librarian for the English Department and Writing Center. I will go ahead and turn it over to Sara. Everyone is currently muted, and if you guys have any issues or anything, I will go ahead and monitor the chat box. So just send us a chat and we will see what we can do to get your questions answered. I am making Sara the presenter and we'll get started. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you, Peggy. Can everybody see my screen? Everybody see the slides? I think we're good. All right, well, just a second, let me make sure I can see my slides. All right. So, hi, I'm Sara Maurice Whitver, and I'm the coordinator of library instruction here at the University of Alabama Libraries. I have a couple of comments before we jump straight into the more, I guess, the meat of this presentation. The first thing is that as Kevin and I are talking about our assessment, one of the things that we're very careful about is that we're not talking about assessment as the measurement of learning. It's very difficult to measure learning, especially in the type of work that we do. So as we're progressing through our conversation here, I think you'll notice that we talk about measuring development or growth and things like that. So we really try to shy away from that notion that what we're doing is assessing learning. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that as we're talking about this, what we're basically doing is a progressive update reflecting on the past 5 years of the development of a program. And our program is definitely informed by the literature and by national trends to some extent, but a lot of what we're doing is based on our own local needs. So today, Kevin and I are going to talk to you about the development of our library instruction program in order to help you understand how we're doing assessment. And when I say how, I actually mean why. Because neither of us believe in assessment for the sake of assessment. Assessment is research. It means making sure that our library faculty have the data that allows them to know where and how to improve. It means ensuring our program meets the needs of our partners, and it means tracking skills development of our students in order to measure the effectiveness of our efforts. Oh, here we go. Sorry, I'm having some technical issues for a second here. For some reason, my slides are not advancing. Oh, there we go. So a little bit about the background of our program. In 2012, as a part of the development of a standardized instruction program for first-year writing instruction, I began exploring options for conducting classroom assessment. At that point, Kevin and I sat down to talk about the assessment portion of this program, and our conversations ultimately resulted in the design of not end of semester quizzes, end of session quizzes that lived in Google Docs forums, and they were embedded in our LibGuides. We learned a lot from these assessments. The quizzes identified issues that correlated with what we were reading in the literature, that students struggle with related terms and synonyms. Students struggle to recognize popular sources if the author has a PhD or other academic credentials. But this wasn't enough for us. It didn't allow us to actually observe our students' engagement in the development of information literacy. And while it offered us an opportunity for adjustment, it didn't allow us to reflect on our teaching as deeply as we wanted to. So in 2012 at the Alabama Library Association, I was really inspired by Tony Carter, who presented on Auburn's method of conducting worksheet assessment. I really loved that idea. And at ACRL in 2013, I participated in a Rails workshop and learned to design rubrics to grade the worksheets that we were using. And that's when our journey of authentic assessment in the classroom began. Um, this assessment revolutionized our teaching. It gave our
Sarah,
team, yes.
your slides are not advancing.
Are they not?
No, ma'am.
Oh, like I said, I'm having trouble here. Oh, there we go. What is going on? Um,
There they go.
are they? Just a second, everybody. My slides are messed up. Oh, there we go. Okay. So this worksheet, can everybody see the one that has 2013, the
Yes.
example of the worksheet? Okay. The worksheet assessment really revolutionized our teaching, like I was saying. It gave our team a way to talk about what we were doing and how we were doing it, and it allowed us to see how our program was performing across the board. We did this assessment in addition to our end of session quizzes, and this allowed us to improve our teaching and to refine and adjust our learning outcomes. And through that process, we saw a lot of improvement. Okay. So what you're seeing here is an outline of our current program design. In 2015, we completely redesigned our first year writing library instruction program, and we converted it from a 2-session sequence to a 4 option menu. This happened in collaboration with a complete redesign of the curriculum in our first year writing program. We still meet standardized learning outcomes with each of the options, but writing instructors have the ability to choose which option they want to bring their class to and in what order. Our sessions are designed to support the information literacy skills represented in the first year writing program's curriculum within their writing units. And at this point, Kevin and I began talking about using a mixed method approach for assessing both teaching and learning. We wanted more out of our data. We wanted to determine if students were developing skills over the course of the semester. We wanted to know what kind of impact our instruction was having over the course of a semester rather than just a snapshot at the end of a class period. Through long conversations about our goals and lots of reading and attending conference presentations, we've implemented a mixed methods approach to monitoring our program. The assessment component of our instruction program allows us the capacity to measure growth and development in students and observe their process work, as well as offers us the chance to reflect on our own individual performance in the classroom and the performance, our performance as a team. So just to follow up with that, there are usually somewhere between 7 and 9 instruction librarians participating in library instruction for first year writing at any time. So this allows us to also reflect on how we're doing corporately as well as individually. It allows us to grow as teachers and identify areas of successes and challenges. It allows us to report more qualitatively on the impact we're having on students. Additionally, every instrument we have designed, we've designed with a pedagogical function. Every question, even the ones on our faculty surveys, intentionally ask questions that prompt thinking and reflection. Okay, and at this point, I'm going to pass this over to Kevin.
All right. Hopefully everyone's seeing my slide here. Um, Now, before I get into the specifics surrounding the assessment tools we're using with this project, I'd like to touch on assessment more generally. And overall, I would classify assessment into two categories, which I'll just call productional and functional assessment. And I'll say that productional assessment is um, it's likely what comes to mind when a lot of us hear the phrase library assessment. Here we're talking about assessment of the library's ability to produce value through its services, collections, and facilities by simply providing access to these things. Gate counts, instructional numbers, circ stats are all examples of productional assessment metrics. And while there are some who will call into question the validity and value of these traditional metrics, I am not one of those people. Instead, I believe there is a time and a place to take advantage of this sort of assessment, and that these metrics can help to show value in very basic and straightforward ways that are easily consumed by our public stakeholders and university administrators. On the other hand, with functional assessment, we're actually looking at how a library process or tool functions. Of course, this type of assessment requires more complex processes that simply accounting for the fluctuations in a single variable will not kind of tell the whole story. The number of people walking through our doors is just that, the number of people walking through our doors. But with functional assessment, there are usually several variables in play that we may or may not completely understand at the outset. With functional assessment, we are often examining complex phenomena like why print circulation is waning, or how users interact with our website, or how well our instructional programs facilitate learning. So while productional assessment can answer who, what, when, or where, functional assessment is more concerned with the how or why questions. How are library collections supporting research on campus? Why are students having problems using databases? So with this in mind, I will first briefly touch on the productional assessment we use with our instructional program, and then get into the functional piece after that. And I hope you will not mind if my comments about our productional assessment efforts are quite limited. I just figure that we're all fairly experienced with those traditional metrics that I've just alluded to, and probably have sat through enough conference proceedings on that to never hear much on it again. But having said that, in terms of those productional stats we track for instruction, I'll say that we are probably using the same metrics that a lot of you are already using as well. For example, we track the number of instructional sessions taught, the number of attendees for those sessions, any course-related information, as well as which librarians taught those sessions. And while we used to do this on paper, for the last 6 or so years, we've been using SpringShare products, specifically LibAnalytics, to capture these data. Before that, I think it was Ref Analytics, and we will soon move over from LibAnalytics to LibInsight, but they're all SpringShare products. Now, with LibAnalytics, we have the ability to build digital forms that allow us to track everything we use, everything we used to track on the paper forms, as well as a host of additional metrics that we find useful. LibAnalytics is all web-based and really easy to use, and hopefully everyone can kind of see this slide right here. This is actually our instructional tracking data set that we use in LibAnalytics, and it's pretty simple and straightforward. In the top left corner, you can see who enters in a particular record. We've got session date, service provider, and a host of other metrics that we like to look at. But we also have a specific area for strategic tracking. For example, we want to easily be able to pull on the back end when we're doing reporting everything related to EN 102. So we can just mark that record with EN 102, or if we want to know the graduate courses or the orientation sessions that we're teaching, if we create that strategic tracking variable, it makes it very easy to pull that data through the reporting functions. And of course, because EN 102, this program is so big and we do so many sessions with it, there's a section that's specifically for tracking data relative to that. For example, we can see the venue that we were teaching in, also which instructional option we were teaching and on what day we taught it. So even though there is a 1 through 4 option, they don't have to be taught in that order. And indeed, if we were, later on we might want to know, was there a difference between those classes in terms of their performance on our pre and post test? Is there a difference between those classes that may have taken the 3 option before the 2 option and so forth and so on? So this gives us the ability to kind of track that. The benefits to this system are fairly abundant, I think. Specifically, anyone on staff can easily access these forms from any computer that's got web access. So whether you're at the desk helping a student in your office or at home doing work, you can enter and also access the data. And secondly, those monthly and annual reports, which is something that I've always been pretty heavily involved with, they become much easier with something like this. It can take me just a few minutes to pull together reports that once might have taken me several hours or maybe even a couple of days. And you also have the ability to export this data into an Excel file for easy manipulation and analysis. And finally, there's no more paper records to keep track of, which is great, I think. And with that, that's pretty much my discussion of the productional assessment tracking. And of course, if you have some questions, feel free to ask those at the end. But for now, I'd like to switch gears into the functional assessment piece. And with this type of assessment, my approach is a bit more rigorous. Indeed, I would say that your approach to functional assessment, as Sara alluded to earlier, should be a lot like your approach to academic research proper. I personally work from the assessment as inquiry mindset, which means starting with a foundational or a foundation of testable questions or assertions. And this is, of course, the classic deductive approach, which comes out of the positivist, post-positivist ontological and epistemological frameworks. And this paradigm asserts that there is an objective reality and that we can objectively measure, study, and understand that reality. Further, we utilize quantitative methods to codify our observations about this objective reality. And here, research findings are considered in relation to our a priori or before the fact hypotheses. And this is really the defining mindset of the modern age or modernity. Of course, though, we have to recognize that the postmodernist schools in the social sciences and humanities in particular have ushered in an era of research driven by inductive approaches that are informed by constructivist or interpretivist ontologies and epistemologies that endorse the notion of a subjective reality that is, or at least a subjective social reality that is defined by contextual circumstances. And of course, to better understand the rich contextual data that describes our subjective social realities, we utilize qualitative methods aimed at gathering large amounts of data that is then analyzed to uncover emergent trends and themes. And with this sort of research, findings are really considered in relation to themselves mostly, rather than more generally. So with that crash course in the foundations of research complete, let's talk about what we're doing here at UA in terms of functional assessment. Overall, our approach is informed by several basic questions about our information literacy program. Are students getting anything out of our instructional program? That is, are they leaving these sessions with understandings that they did not have before? And getting a bit more specific, is the instructional program effective in regards to facilitating our students' engagement with important information literacy concepts? For example, are we effectively imparting those core concepts outlined within the AACRL framework, for example? Of course, these bigger questions that are more foundational, they encapsulate smaller questions that are a little bit more specific about students. For example, what previous experiences before exposure to our instructional program are associated with higher levels of understanding and successful engagement with those core information literacy concepts that we present. With professors, we want to know, are the students in some classes engaging with these concepts more effectively? If so, is this phenomenon related to instructional variations we see across the pool of EN 102 instructors? Are there any classroom practices or specific types of assignments that help students more effectively engage with information literacy concepts when they arrive for their sessions at the library? And of course, finally, with librarians, are there certain practices within the library classroom that result in more beneficial outcomes for the students? And importantly, there are already a host of articles out there that kind of touch on a lot of these things, and we use those within our theoretical framework, but we do want to know exactly how those theories are functioning within our own environment. And each of these questions, for that reason, represent variables we must account for if we expect to understand the most basic functional aspects of information literacy and the library's place in assisting users to develop those skills and conceptual understandings that define it. And to that end, we have chosen several tools for assessing the effectiveness of our instructional program. Specifically, we utilize a pre-post test, which helps us measure students' progress toward understanding information literacy concepts. We also use instructor and student surveys along with that productional assessment data we track in LibAnalytics, which provides additional information we will need to fully understand our pre and post test results. We're also experimenting with the assessment of our in-class worksheets, which, as Sara might have mentioned earlier, provide for real-time authentic assessment of student engagement with those information literacy concepts discussed during our instruction. And now I want to walk you through a bit more detail with each of these. So with regard to our pre and post test methodology, this approach allows us to measure several dimensions of student progress. We test the student before they attend library instruction and then again afterward. Moreover, we can look at this progress several ways. For example, or at least analyze it in several different ways. For example, using what's called a pair-T test, we can determine if there is a statistically significant difference between students' performance on the pre-test versus the post-test. We might also use a two-sample t-test or an analysis of variance, what's called a ANOVA, to look at variations in progress across two or more groups or subgroups that we define. For example, we might want to know if students who attend 2 or 3 sessions fare better on the post-test than those students who only attend 1 session. We might also look at variations seen across differing library instructors. There really are a lot of analytical options dealing with students, the library instructors, as well as the course instructors. And our abilities in this regard rely on data collected via other assessment tools I referred to a moment ago. And of course, we could even look at something like a multiple regression model where we get a little bit more information about the student in the beginning that might help us understand more the variables that come into play and what types of activities or experiences students have before they come to us that help them to be more successful in our program and indeed throughout the rest of their matriculation. Now, we administer the pre and post tests through Qualtrics, which is a tool geared towards survey-based assessment. Basically, Qualtrics allows us to create and administer web-based survey instruments. Additionally, our tests have four main sections. Really, the test is only one piece of it, but we have the IRB statement, which you may or may not need, an anonymous identification section, a section that's going to survey the student, as well as the information literacy test itself. And of course, like I said, the IRB statement is only needed if you plan on using the data you gather to produce some sort of publication. And the statement that we provide simply tells students, the research that's occurring and what their rights are as participants in that, which includes, they can actually, they do not have an option to not participate in that. This is part of their course. But that being said, we do allow them to take their data away and not be included in the data analysis piece. So that's really what the purpose of that is. And with the anonymous identification section, this kind of feeds back into the IRB requirements, but this section allows us to identify the participant and student without compromising their privacy. For example, the pre and post test method, for it to work, we must be able to attach each student's pre-test to the post-test, or at least for it to work in the way that we're trying to get it to work. You could look at it at the macro level where you're just looking at different courses, and it wouldn't matter, if you had the student level information, but we might want to get into a little bit more detail. So for that reason, we want to see the progress each student makes. And of course, the IRB wants us to keep the data anonymous whenever possible, so we ask that the students create an anonymous identifier that will be unique but does not tell us, the librarians, who they are. So we ask each student to create an identifier based on like the first two letters of their first and last name along with the last four digits of their campus-wide ID or CWID. And here I will note that the current formula seems to be too complicated for some students, so I'm likely going to lobby the IRB to allow us to just collect the campus-wide IDs, which we can then sufficiently anonymize after the fact, because if those identifiers are a little bit inaccurate, or if they're entered incorrectly, it does pose a little bit of difficulty in cleaning that all up. And in addition to the anonymous identifier, we also ask the student to identify their course section, and here we do not simply ask them to type in their course section, but instead give them a drop-down menu that shows the information for all sections being taught this semester. And we pulled this information directly from our online course catalog here at UA, which is called Course Leaf, and that made it actually very easy, and I hope all of you have the ability to do that, because it does make that process much simpler. And by asking the student to identify their section, we accomplish a few things. First, it allows us a second method besides their anonymous identifier to determine who they are and to which experimental group they belong. And as I alluded to earlier, some classes will receive 3 to 4 sessions while others attend only 1 session. And if the student enters their anonymous identifier incorrectly or something like that, if they enter it one way on the pretest and one way on the post-test, I may be able to sort that problem out, because of the fact that I know which class they belong to or which course section they belong to. And of course, we also provide an option for those courses that might not be listed within our drop-down menu, which happens from time to time, especially at the beginning of the semester when extra sections are added after we've already created our form. Additionally, using LibAnalytics, we can pull data that tells us how many sessions a particular class attended and which librarian taught those, then attach this to the individual course level data, and these will all act as additional variables within our analytical models. So the next section collects data related to the students' previous experiences with information literacy, training, also with academic research in libraries in general. It also asks a couple of questions about what their EN 102 instructor has covered in class, before coming in, namely about choosing sources and what constitutes plagiarism, what peer review is. And the last section of the pretest is, of course, the information literacy test, which is made up of 15 questions that as a whole cover all aspects of several different frameworks, but the AACRL framework is one that comes to mind here, but we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But here I want to talk a bit about the questions we used. And it's important to note that we are really attempting to gauge a student's mastery of information literacy concepts, meaning that we're not simply concerned with their proficiency in using the library website to find sources. And while there is little doubt that a library user's mastery of library collections and tools, namely the website, to determine, to a degree, their ability to find source materials for their research, we're really attempting to be a bit more ambitious with this project. And what Sara and I want to understand is whether or not students demonstrate those foundational understandings that make them information literate. That is to say, we are attempting to teach these students those skills or help them engage with those skills that will ensure that no matter the topic or situation, they will be able to find, vet, and cite any information they come across and need to use. With this in mind, we utilized a series of scenario-based questions that ask the student to imagine themselves in a series of real-world research situations and respond appropriately. And I want to show you one of these, but first I'm going to touch on the PostTest for a moment. Now, the PostTest is almost identical to the pretest, except that in the place of the questions about previous research experience and those other things I mentioned a moment ago, we ask a series of questions about the student's experience with the library instructional sessions that they attended and the librarian instructor, as well as some additional questions about information literacy related concepts covered in their English class, during the times they were coming in or after they had finished coming in, just after they had initiated their work with us. And overall, this allows us to collect data that should help us to create a few additional variables tied to the library classroom experiences and the librarian instructor as well. Ideally, we might also share this data with library instructors so they can capitalize on anything they're doing really well, as well as improve anywhere where they're falling short of their own expectations. Now, having said that, going back to our scenario-based questions, let's take a look at an example. So here was one that we did. You have been assigned a paper that asks you to explore how technology is affecting society. Your professor has asked that you cite at least 5 scholarly sources. When considering your topic, the first thing that comes to your mind is social media, and of course that is too broad of a topic. So you Google the phrase, "How social media affects society." The results of your search produce several blog posts on technology websites, as well as a few articles on business media websites. From the choices below, which do you think represents the next best step for conducting research on your paper topic? Choice A, use the preliminary Google search results to identify relevant keywords to narrow your topic, then use those keywords to conduct a search within a library database. Option B, Google should never be used for school research, so you go to the library's website instead. Option C, you found several results through your Google search that look pretty good. There are articles written by industry experts and published within reputable popular sources, so you start writing your paper. And D, I'm not sure. Now, there are several things going on here. This is deceptively complex. First, obviously, there is the scenario itself, which we believe is the best vehicle by which to assess information literacy, namely because information literacy is a life skill and an intellectual process that occurs within the context of such scenarios. Secondly, while the scenario centers on an academic assignment, we also wanted to incorporate elements that are not traditionally ideal, one might say, from an academic standpoint. For example, the student in this scenario is starting their research for scholarly sources with Google. And while this may be less than ideal, it is in fact more realistic, especially for a first-year student. Additionally, as internet sources, and Google in particular, have become more reliable in terms of delivering access to authoritative and useful information, there's really no reason why we should dissuade students from their natural instinct to Google it. Indeed, I'm sure many of you tell your students the same thing, Sarah and I tell ours. Google is a great place to start. If you know nothing about your topic, Google it, read the Wikipedia entry and use what you find to derive some highly relevant keywords for the search string you will use to find scholarly sources within the library's academic databases. And indeed, this scenario is described quite nicely for option A, which is the best answer in this case. And digging even deeper into this scenario, the results of this hypothetical preliminary search are not scholarly at all, but blog posts, which presents the students with a second layer of information literate behavior in that they now are confronting the notion of authority. And this bit of framework modeling is seen with option C as well, which offers the students an efficient but ultimately flawed path to completing their assignment. Yes, they may have identified sources that are written by industry experts within reputable publications, but they're not scholarly in nature. And even though a student may not catch that flaw presented in option C, they're still receiving reinforcement on the concept of authority is constructed and contextual. And finally, with option D, we provide an easy out for the student. And here I will mention the classic complaint of, I think, a lot of good teachers that are out there, which is multiple choice really should be called multiple guess, right? And we take this point and hope that this easy out option of responding, I don't know, is able to mitigate the student's urge to simply take a guess when faced with a scenario they are unsure of how to effectively navigate. So at this point, I'd like to turn things back over to Sara, who has pulled together a matrix that kind of sums up everything I just said about this scenario approach quite nicely. And she'll also tell you a little bit about our work with the in-class worksheets. So let's see here. I'm going to change presenters. And here we go.
All right. So can everybody hear me again? Let me make sure I'm advancing my slides. Okay. So that scenario that we just saw, I wanted to give you an example of how we would map such a scenario for the purpose of both the design of the scenario and then the assessment of the data that we're getting. Whenever I'm putting anything like this together, in so much of my design work, I always have Kevin's voice in the back of my head asking, what data are you trying to get from this? What are you hoping to find out? Those are two foundational questions that we ask when we're putting any question together, when we're putting any survey together, when we're creating any worksheet. And with these questions in mind, as we developed our scenario questions, we carefully designed each one using both the framework for information literacy for higher education and the framework for success in post-secondary writing, which is was created by the Writing Program Administrators Association, which is the corollary basically to AACRL for first-year writing. And then we also incorporated Bloom's taxonomy so that we had so that we were aiming for the right level of learning, sort of that mid to higher level, higher order learning. With these three related sets of values to develop questions, we developed these questions to prompt critical thinking and to address the cognitive skills that first-year writing students need to have in order to successfully accomplish the tasks within their writing course. This will enable us to code the responses in our analysis as well. We'll be able to say if a student is struggling in one area more than another, and students as a whole, when we look at the composite scores. And we're hoping to be able to refine this process even more in the coming year. I'd like to move to our worksheets now. Our in-class worksheets function a couple of different ways. They provide formative assessment for us. Uh, they allow us to authentically measure the learning that's occurring in the moment. And I say at the beginning, I said that we're trying to be very careful about saying measuring learning. What we really mean here is, are they understanding? Are they applying? Are they analyzing? Um, shooting into that middle area of Bloom's taxonomy, are they able to assimilate the information that we're giving them in the class, and then are they able to begin using it, using the skills and the information that we've given them, and how can we see that process working? The worksheets really allow us to see that. It also gives us summative information. It allows us to authentically measure how well students are engaging in the process when we're able to reflect on it, right? So this information is qualitative and it's used inductively. Worksheets are a useful instrument for conducting both formative and summative assessment in an authentic manner. We have developed standardized worksheets that are used as authentic assessment instruments to measure the set of learning outcomes of each of our library instruction lesson options. Librarians implement worksheet assessment in a minimum of one class per lesson each semester. So for example, if they're teaching our first option, which is basic searching in Scout, 4 times, they just have to implement the worksheets in one of those 4 sessions, and so forth for each of our 4 options. Librarians can revise the wording and add content to our worksheets, for example, additional activities or graphs, etc., in order to better utilize the worksheets to support their teaching style. But the basic content of the worksheet should not be subtracted. So they can't take anything off of the worksheet, but they can add to the worksheet, and they can sort of make it look a little bit different to accommodate their teaching style. Here is a snapshot of one of the worksheets completed. Our worksheets function in a few different ways. They're designed with the intention that students will have time to practice the skills they're learning as we go along in class, and they allow us to track how well they understand what we're communicating to them. We routinely collect the worksheets at the end of class to facilitate after-class reflection, both individually as individual librarians and at the end of the semester as a group. We grade our collected worksheets as a group using a standardized rubric, which we spend a considerable amount of time norming. The norming process requires us to all get together on the same page about how we're interpreting our learning outcomes, and it allows us to be more objective about the quality of work our students are producing in class. It allows us to have conversations about where we might, as a team, be falling short of our goals. Here's another example of our worksheets. Oh, I have a couple of other comments about the future of what we're trying to do here. Some of our challenges that we've had in implementing our assessment program has been in communicating with our partners, both with our team of librarians and with our partners over in first year writing. In a spring semester, such as the one that we're in right now, there are approximately 145 sections of EN 102, which means that we're working with somewhere around 70 writing instructors, plus the administration of first year writing. And a lot of those writing instructors are faculty, so they have um, academic freedom within their class and can choose to come to library instruction or not, and can choose to participate in our assessment or not. So one of the things that we are working on, and one of the big questions that we have, is how do we improve our outreach to our partners? How do we communicate with our librarians about the value of our assessment? How do we communicate to our writing instructors about the value of our assessment? Um, how do we get buy-in? And so one of the things that we did last semester was relied on our librarians to communicate about um, what we were going to be doing functionally with the pre-test and post-test and with the worksheets, and they did a great job with that. But when we looked back on it, it seemed that perhaps we could standardize that message and that outreach a little bit better. So we've started communicating directly to the writing instructors about both of these things, and explained at the beginning of the semester what we were doing so that they could incorporate it more organically within their courses and their curriculum. And that seems to be working out a lot better. So when they come to meet with the librarian to talk about their plan for the library instruction sessions, the librarian just has the job of reinforcing that rather than introducing it in addition to planning the sessions. Another thing that we've recognized as a challenge is balancing the need for standardization and flexibility in our worksheets. And so designing worksheets that are standardized enough that we're able to assess them with a rubric, but also providing some flexibility uh, for individual teaching approaches. Um, the norming of the rubric takes a lot of time to achieve objectivity, and the more standardized the worksheet is, the easier that job is. But when you get into highly prescriptive worksheets, you start impeding a librarian's ability to teach naturally. So we're really playing with this idea of flexibility in our worksheets and trying to find a good balance between standardization and customization with those worksheets. Finally, a challenge that we are still working on, although we've seen great improvement with it, is we've been doing our faculty surveys. We have an end of semester survey, and we also have an end of session survey that are both optional for faculty. They're channels that are available for them to give us feedback. And our end of semester survey in particular often generates very positive input. So whenever people have good experiences with the library, they are more inclined to do the survey. Um, Occasionally, we get very negative feedback if somebody's just had a horrible experience, which we don't find happens very often, or people don't communicate that with us as freely as they do their positive experiences. So trying to get more balanced feedback through our surveys has been a challenge, and like I said, we've actually made an improvement on that, and we hope to improve on that a little bit more. Typically, the negative feedback comes, and we know that it's out there because it gets passed either through what I'm just going to refer to it as the gossip chain, although it's a little bit more formalized than that. Typically what happens is an instructor will talk to somebody that's in the administration of first year writing, and they will pass it to the director, and the director will pass it to me. Usually I get it third or fourth hand, and by the time I get it, I don't know what session they were attending or exactly what class came in or what librarian they were meeting with or any of the actual details of the circumstances. That I just get my negative feedback is usually something like, oh, some people are not as good as others in their library instruction, or um, it's all terribly general, and it's difficult to address when it's that general and broad. So we're really trying to do some outreach in making sure that people have multiple channels for giving us feedback, and that they're encouraged to give us any constructive feedback that they have, whether it's good or bad, so that we can address problems that are being encountered. Um, so I think we've been talking for quite a bit of time, and it's time for you guys to be able to talk or ask us questions. We've given a lot of kind of nerdy information, so we're open for questions now, if anybody has any.
Thank you, Sarah and Kevin.
Welcome.
Actually, it is a lot of great information. I have a question. Are you guys going to expand this to other um, disciplines or across the board generally? If so, I'm sure it's going to be a long process, but can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I guess I'll start, and then if Kevin has something to add, it's definitely something that we've been talking about for about maybe the last year or a little bit more than the last year. We are attempting to expand this to the rest of our instruction. We have a pretty formal instruction team outside of the folks who teach first year writing. We have somewhere around 17 to 20 instruction librarians at our library, and we're in the middle of a curriculum mapping project that is a 3-year project, and we are 2 years into our 3-year project. What we're doing right now is trying to move from that macro level of looking at programs and departments as wholes, and trying to start focus down onto individual courses. And we've broken things down using our the matrix for our core curriculum, and we've identified different levels. So we have a good idea of which parts of the core curriculum fall into a beginner or an intermediate or an advanced level of course material. And right now, as a group, our instruction group is starting to develop skill sets that are appropriate for beginners and intermediate and advanced learners. And then at that point, Kevin and I are talking about putting a toolkit together for our librarians so that they are trained to put worksheets together. They are trained to be able to ask meaningful discussion questions that can be assessed, and be able to implement things like polling, um, things like that. It's really quite a big task, though, and we're focusing first on undergraduate, and then we'll move into the graduate. Although I think the graduate program will, or the assessment of graduate work is going to be, in a way, it's going to be more unique, and in another way, it's going to be a lot easier because the level of skill that graduate students need is pretty easy to identify.
I guess I will chime in and say that you know, to be honest, I want to get through this project before I expand it too much. But that's the goal, though. And Sarah's got some really great ideas about how she wants this to move forward. I'm kind of more the analytical guy on this one, and I'd like to see I'd like to see what this data tells us. I've done one project like this before, working with another instructional librarian here, um, there's an article out there swimming around about that project. And really, when we got to the end of that project, I could tell that there were a lot of things I would have done differently, and we've tried to do that here. I mean, I keep my eye out on the literature on this particular topic, and no one has developed a really good pre and post test for this yet that I have seen. I mean, there's some decent ones out there, but that's something that's been, I think, very hard for us as librarians to do, which is somehow create a testing mechanism that can really capture, the students' abilities in a way that's meaningful to us and that helps us to improve. But yeah, as we start analyzing this data, I'd like to go back and revisit some of the questions that we use, some of the scenarios, and maybe polish those up a touch. And I guess it all depends on what we're seeing there. But at the end of the day, we'd really like the ability to do this with all of our instruction, and Sarah's been talking about really scaffolding the instruction a lot more, and we have new librarians that have come on that are helping us with building those asynchronous components that we will want to roll some assessment into as well. So there's definitely a lot of expansion in the works, but how fast that will go, who knows?
Thank you, but this is Peggy again. That is, I mean, I am just I mean, this is great. And the only problem is I sit here and wonder how I can do it in my own work, and I get a little bit overwhelmed with all of it. We are coming up on the hour. I don't see any questions in the chat box. If you guys would, enter, we'll give it another minute or two, and then we'll let these guys go. So I do have a quick question. Any pushback from the librarians when you started this? Or now?
Yeah, so, we've got a great team here, and everybody is very collegial. I think, like I was saying, the only real challenge that we have really encountered has been with the worksheets, the idea of standardization, and I think we have a culture of really trying to invest in our identities as teachers here, and trying to be sensitive to that, and really listen to our librarians when they are talking about how perhaps parts of the worksheets are less comfortable for them to address because they don't they don't do things in that way. Perhaps, they don't um, incorporate a lot of writing. They do like other types of matching exercises, or other things that are definitely active and require critical thinking, but perhaps don't reflect. If I'm putting the worksheet together, it's going to have a whole lot of writing in it. And because I buy into that idea that writing is a mode of learning, and we're working within a composition class, and so writing is the thing that they're supposed to be doing. But trying to be sensitive to the way that other people do things is, I think, probably the biggest challenge, and the thing that we've gotten feedback with, although honestly, our librarians are amazing here, and they're kind when they give us feedback, and they understand that what we're trying to do is meaningful, and it has meaning for them. So I would say that's what kind of pushback, if you can call that pushback.
Yeah, and I try to personally, I try to deflect any pushback, not in a bad way, but what I tell people is that first of all, you know, this data that we're gathering, I want everyone to have access to it. I want everyone to be able to utilize it for their own edification. But also, if someone feels like they have a really good way of doing something, let's put it under the microscope. Let's collect some data on it. I have no personal investment in any of these approaches. I mean, my goal, I think, has always been that I want to do whatever works best. I'm a pragmatist, and if you've got the best way of doing it, let's put it under a microscope. Let's collect some data on it, and let's compare it to what someone else is doing. And I'd like to think that between this big group of 8 or 9 people that are working with this, that between all of us, we can get some great ideas coming from all directions and really polish this thing up and get a instructional program going that we can all be proud of, and that we might be able to help others at other institutions, do the same eventually.
Yeah. And Peggy, back to your comment about being a little overwhelmed with how many pieces are here. Remember that we've added pieces as we've gone along. So we started out with one thing and then we added another thing. And I think that would be my recommendation if anybody was looking at this and they see something that they like, try one thing. Don't try to implement it all at the same time. Try doing some worksheets and designing a rubric, or try putting together a pre-test and post-test. I know there's a lot of examples of scenario-based testing that are out there right now. So, explore some of those options. There's plenty of ways to put one thing together and then get used to doing that, and then add another piece the next semester or the next year as you're learning how to do all of this. Uh, we've developed this. This has been 5 years in the making, and then we still have things that we haven't gotten done yet. So there's no doubt that it's a lot. It keeps us very busy.
I was going to say, I'll bet, and I'll bet. Well, I don't see any more questions. Actually, I do see one more question. The session is being recorded, and I will send out a link to the recording afterwards, and it will actually also include Sara and Kevin's email, because that's the last screen on there. And I will say this from experience, these guys are very good at answering questions and reaching out back to us. So I'm sure they'll be more than happy to help or to share some of their more experience if you drop them a note. And that is all I have. Thank you again, everyone, and thank you, Sara and Kevin. I'm
Thanks,
sure you're
Peggy.
hearing from some of us. All right, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.